Hi guys, my name is Dipender and this is Desi Codes. So I'm back with another tutorial. I wouldn't call it a series as it's going to be pretty short. So without wasting any time, let's just jump right into it and let's see what it is about. So it's about a specific component by the MUI library, formerly known as Material UI, and the component that we will be looking at is the Autocomplete component. Pretty simple, like pretty straightforward. It speaks for itself. It's a combination between an input field, type of text, and a select list, similar to any search input box. That's what it is. So over here, when we click on this component, it pops open a list of all the different options which are available, and the user can select any one of these values by default. And they also have the option to search between the options by using it as an input box, and just filters out all the different options based on what the user entered. So this is like the default way of using the autocomplete component. Now there is also one other way in which we can use it, is by allowing it to allow the user to select multiple values. So over here we have the same component but with a different configuration, where the user can select multiple values, and all the selected options are visible right within the autocomplete component, as you can see. So if they wish to unselect any one of these options, they can just click on the cross button which is right next to them, or they can just click on the same option in the list and it kind of does the same thing. So this is like the default behavior of showing the selected option right within the autocomplete component. So this is where this tutorial comes in. We will be using the same component, the autocomplete component, with the multiple configuration, but in a way where the selected option and the button to remove them will be displayed somewhere else. And in order for you to easily comprehend the idea behind this tutorial, we will be working on a UI as such. Now, just to give you a context, the idea behind this UI specifically is that whenever you create, you must have seen something similar, like when you create a new project on different platforms, applications, CMS, CRMs, whenever you create a new project, you are given the option to invite your fellow team members to that specific project. So that's where the inspiration came from for this particular UI. And also, we won't be building the entire thing because that's not relevant for this specific topic. We will just be focusing upon this specific part where we have the autocomplete component, and when the user clicks on it, it pops open a list of different users. The user name is visible, and as soon as they click on any of the option or the user, it gets added. And the user also has a few other attributes attached to them, such as the avatar, the name, which is in fact kind of shown in the list, the email address, and also a button to remove them, which in this case would actually be unselecting the user from the list. So that's how we will be making use of the same component. Now, if you want to follow up the same tutorial, which I would suggest that you do, you can download the starters code from the description of this video, unzip the file, install the npm packages, run the npm run dev command. You can look it up in the package JSON, and you should be having something like this. So if you want to follow, I would suggest you do. And let's continue with this thing in the next video. But before that, there's something important. I was checking the other day the ratio between the subscribed viewers and unsubscribed viewers, and the difference was huge. So if you haven't already subscribed to this channel, I would request that you do. It would mean a lot and give me the motivation to keep making more of such content. Anyway, see you in the next one, and again, thank you for watching. Alright, so let's continue. Now, assuming you have downloaded the starters code, unzipped the file, installed the npm packages, and have everything up and running, you should be seeing something like this. So without wasting any time, let's jump right into it. So the thing is, I wouldn't dive deep into the overall structure of the project. It is assumed that you do have a little bit of experience with MUI library itself, but still, just to be on the same page, let's take a look at the app component that we got. So the app component, over here we have the theme provider coming from the MUI library. Now the theme provider speaks for itself. It wraps around the entire application, most of the time, almost 99%. It wraps around the entire application and it takes in a prop called theme, the value of which is supposed to be the theme that you want to use, the custom theme that you created. So that's what we are passing down, the theme which is coming from the theme.js file. Then we got the CSS baseline, which is a component that brings in some standardized styling similar to normalized CSS style sheet, and plus a couple of few other things which it does. Then we got a stack component, which is wrapping, which is essentially the background of this application, the background that you see, the one wrapping the entire thing. It got the height of 100 VH, which is 100 viewport height, the same as of the user's device. Then it also has the align items and justify content to be off center, which is aligning this invite modal. Now this thing over here, it is referred as invite modal. This one right over here. Now the reason why I'm kind of stating in such a way, so that again we all are on the same page. So apart from this, then we have the invite modal itself right over here, and we will be just working in this particular component. This is what we will be focusing upon. So within this component, we got the modal wrapper, which kind of gives it the overall style and feel to this entire thing. Then we got the header, which is wrapping these three things. One second. These three things that we have. This is the header. Below this, we got the button, which is right over here. So now we also have one other thing called team users. Now this is a dummy array. It's dummy data that we will be making use of with the autocomplete component. So let's take a look at what we are doing. So firstly, we have this array 10. We are calling the array constructor with a numeric value of 10, which creates an array with that many empty elements, undefined elements, or empty elements you can say. And we are using the keys, which would result in giving us the keys as in the index values, and we are creating an array out of it. So this is merely used to create a dummy sort of array, which we can map over and kind of transform our own custom array. We can get our own custom array, for which what we are doing is for each element we are returning back an object, and that object, now this object that you see, it's actually the user object, the object denoting each individual user. So each object has few properties. The first one is label, which the value of which is this. Now we are making use of a library called faker, which is used to kind of generate dummy data, random dummy data, and it comes with a bunch of different helper functions and methods which you can make use of. So the value of label is this faker.name.firstname, which creates a dummy name. Now the reason why we have set the property name or the key name to be of label is something related to the autocomplete. Otherwise, the appropriate name for this particular value should be first name, but it will be more clear once we get to the autocomplete. Then we also have the email, for which we are again making use of a utility function and for a helper function or a method provided by the library. And in the end, we have the avatar, for which we are making use of this function, which gives the URL for a dummy avatar. So let's just kind of log this entire thing so that it's easier for us to understand the structure. And for which, let me just log the team users. Let's see. So now there we have the array, and as you can see, there we have 10 different users dummy data that we can work with. So that's perfect. As you can see, each one of them has the 3 properties for which we use different functions. Perfect. So now let's make use of the autocomplete component right away without wasting any time. And let's first import the autocomplete component and place it right below the header. So I'm going to place it right over here. Now the autocomplete component, it requires two mandatory or required props. It requires 2 props which you have to pass. So the first one is the options, for which we have to pass in an array. Now the options are basically the options that you want to pass in, and the structure of options can either be one of two. So let me just show you the different way, the option structure. So regardless, it has to be an array, whether you go with the first one or the latter one, the other one. So it could be an array of objects, and if you go with this way where the elements are objects, then each one of them is supposed to have a key by the name of label. And this is the reason why we kind of set the property of this, the first name, to be label. Now you could go with the first name, but in that case you will have to make sure to kind of transform the array before you actually pass it down and use the first name as a label. You'll have to kind of do a bit of modification right there. Anyway, just to kind of keep it simple, I decided to set it as label itself. So yeah, that's the thing. If you're going with the array of objects, then each object is supposed to have the label. Otherwise, if you're going with the other way, is to have an array of string values, which is pretty straightforward, that this would be actually the value shown in the list. So in this case, we will be going with this one, because apart from the name, we also care about the other two properties, which are email and avatar. So that's that. Now let's use the team users, because it's actually in the right format, the way that this autocomplete it expects. So that's the first prop. The other one that we have to pass is the render input. So this function, this is a prop, and it expects a function, and that function has to return back a component which will be used for the autocomplete component. So what do I mean by that? Over here, if we take a look at the dummy example that the documentation provides, as you can see, the render input, it takes the value of it is supposed to be a function, and the first argument of the function is params. So this params that you see, this params is actually the connection between, or to say in other words, it's what the autocomplete component passes down, and you have to make sure that you spread it out to whatever input component that you wish to use. In this case, the example uses text field. Now text field is again a component provided by the MUI library. Let me look it up. Text field. So it's a pretty simple component. There are 3 different styles of variants, and this is what we will be using. So let's do that. One second. So we have to return back, we have to make sure to return the component back which we intend to use. So let's just copy this thing. You can again, you can just pause the video and do the same thing. We have to pass it down in such a way. Let's make sure to import the text field component from the library itself. And as soon as we do that, and if we take a look, there we have the autocomplete component, and it is working. Let's change the label to be of username. So that is perfect, as you can see. So now that it is working, we have to configure this component in such a way so that the user is able to select multiple values. So for that, we don't have to do much. That's kind of the fun thing, or the great thing about the autocomplete. Props to the MUI team, that we just have to pass in the multiple prop in such a way, and it will configure the component so that the user can select multiple values. So isn't that amazing? So now we just have to, we need to have a state which we can bind this component with. Let's create that state. Over here, I'm gonna name it as selected users, and the function to be set selected users. For the state, I will be using the useState hook, and by default it's going to be an array, an empty array. So now let's create a function which will be called whenever the user clicks on any of the option. And for that, let's create the function over here, which we will be naming as handle add or handle select user. Let's go with select user. So this function will be called, and let's actually use it over here first. It's going to be on change, and we can just bind it with this function. Now the on change function that we are passing to the autocomplete, it passes down 3 different props. So let's actually take a look at that. Over here we have the on change. So it passes down 3 different props. The first one is the synthetic event, which we don't really need in this case. The other one is the value, and the last one is the reason. So the reason is actually the event which happened. So it could be any one of them, one of these. It could be select option, remove option, stuff like that. The one that we care about is select option, but still let's take a look at like how it works real time. So over here, as we are calling this function, the first is the synthetic event. We don't need that. The other one is the value. Let's take a look at it. And the last one is the reason. So I'm going to log these two to the console first, and then we'll see how it goes. So now if I select any of the option, as you can see over here, the value is an array consisting of all the selected options. So that's one thing that we have to take care of. And the reason is select option. So now what we will be doing is, as we just saw that there are different types of reasons, the one that we care about is select option. So what we are going to do is, right over here, we will check that if select option, if the reason is equals to this thing, then in that case we will be updating the users list to be to be value, because that's the new array of selected options. So that's perfect. Now that we are doing this thing, let's also log the state. Let's log the selected users and let's see whether it's working or not. So I'm going to refresh, and now if I click on any of the option, as you can see, it is indeed updating the state. So that is perfect. Now there's one other thing. I do not really like kind of this thing of showing the selected option in the list. It should kind of filter out the ones which are already selected. So for that, right over here we have the option of filter selected options. We just have to pass down this prop, and at the same time we will be passing one other prop, which is to remove this thing, the button to kind of clear out the entire thing. So for this over here we will be passing down disable clearable, this prop. So as soon as we do that, now let's refresh and let's take a look. So that's perfect. All right, so now that this overall thing is working, we have to construct the UI first, which is this particular part. So the way that we will be displaying the users is that over here we have the no user selected component. So we will be displaying this component, this no user selected component, if there are no selected users. So for that, right below the autocomplete, let's first use a stack component, and let's set a fixed height of it to be of 350 pixels. Then we will also be setting a padding of about, instead of padding, let's first set my, which is margin in the y axis, and we will be setting the value of it to be of 3. So m is margin, y is x axis, top and bottom. 3 over here doesn't denote as in like 3 pixels, but it's going to be multiplied by 8. Again, I wouldn't dive deep into it, but in short, the library follows a standardized kind of principle and stuff, and one of those principles states that the spacing should be a multiple of 8. So whatever value that we provide, it gets multiplied by 8. However, that's not the case with the dimension. So this 350 is not multiplied by 8. It's 350 pixels. Now within this, let's also do one thing first. Let's set the overflow to be of scroll, so that if anything goes outside this view, it kind of adds the scroll bar. So now right within this component, we will be checking that if the selected users state that we have, if the length of it is 0. So if we reverse the value of 0, it is true. If that's the case, then in that case we will be showing the no user selected. I think I'll have to import it first. Let's do that. No. Oh, 1 second. We will be displaying this component. Otherwise, we will be displaying the users, for which we will do that in a short while. Let's just not return anything at the moment. So now if we refresh and let's take a look, there's something wrong. Stack is not defined. Seems like this, we have to import the stack over here. Okay, so let's take a look, and that is looking perfect. But as soon as we select any user, as you can see, we have nothing because we have to construct that particular UI. So that is good that we are actually able to show the users. And let's do one thing over here. Instead of setting this sort of restriction, we can just actually remove the entire thing, which would mean that regardless what sort of event happens, it just updates the state. So as you can see, if I kind of remove this, it's back to this state, which is perfect. All right, so I think this would be it for this video. Let's continue with this in the next one. All right, so let's continue. So now let's finally wrap up the entire thing. So if we head back to the editor, at the moment we are checking that if there are no users selected, then in that case we are displaying this component, which is a box with a dashed border and a message in the center of the box saying that no user is selected. However, if there are users selected, we are not displaying anything, and we intend to display the users in such a way as what we have in the final version. So for this, let's head back, and where we are not doing anything, like we are returning back the paragraph tag. Instead, we will be mapping over the selected users state, and getting the individual user, we have to generate the UI, for which again I don't want to take up the entire time building the UI. So you can just pause the video and enter and copy the same thing what we have over here, just the highlighted part. So hopefully you have done it, and now if we take a look, we should be I think we have to import a few things. Firstly, we have to make sure to import the avatar, then the typography as well. And now let's refresh. Now if we select any user, perfect. So that is working brilliant. Now let's first add a bit of spacing. It's really triggering my OCD, and for that, right over here, wrapping the entire thing, the one wrapping the entire thing with the height of 350, we will be setting the spacing to be of 2. Let's see, how about 3? And I think that's much better. And now if we actually remove or unselect any user, as you can see, it is reflecting the same change. So that is perfect. Brilliant. Now what we need to do is now this is kind of the main part of the entire tutorial. Now instead of displaying the first thing is that we don't want to show the selected option in the autocomplete component, and for that we will be making use of a specific prop that we can pass to the autocomplete, and the prop is render input. Sorry, not render input, but it is render tags plural. So this particular prop, it takes in a function, and it has to return back the way that you want to display the tags. So what we're going to do is, it takes in 2 arguments. The first one is value, which is an array, and the other one is a function, which when used in a specific way will return back the props. Now it's going to make more sense once we get to that point, but firstly let's take a look at the render tags function, the prop, and as per the documentation, it takes in two props. First one is the value and the other one is get tag props. It's a function. So now what we will be doing, the first objective is to not display anything like in the autocomplete component, and for that we have to return back a React node. So in order to not show anything, we will be returning null. So as you can see that even though we have a couple of options selected, but they are not visible over here. So that's the thing, because we are returning back null. But before we return back null, let's just take a look at the value. What exactly is the first argument? And then we can jump onto the null. So it's kind of like a neat hack that you can use, where you want to log something first and then return back some value, because this the value of this expression is basically undefined, which results in false. So it's first going to execute this and then return back, then jump on to the next one. So now if we take a look, we can see that these are actually the values, and these are indeed the selected options. Like it's an array and the object is the selected option, and these are like in a way passed on, are used to generate the tags. So now what we need to do is we need to take a look at this function, because the delete function, or in short, the function which is called, let me actually show over here, the function which is called when the user clicks on the cross button of any tag, it removes it, and we need that function. We need the reference of that function. So in order to have the reference of that function, what we're going to do is over here, let's do one thing. Let's name this function as update delete functions, FNS, and over here we will basically be calling this function. Now the name of it will make more sense in a short while, so I'm going to replace it with this one, which means that it will receive, the first one is going to be the value and the other one is going to be get tag props, and regardless we have to return back null. So the get tag props, let's call this function get tag props. One second, let's call this function, and this function needs to have a property called index, and the value of it is supposed to be the index of the tag. So as we know that the value, actually this one wouldn't work in such a way, as we know the value is an array, so we will be looping over it. We don't need to map over this thing, we will be looping over this bad boy, and then the individual tag that we get back, actually we don't care about the tag, we care about the index. The index, let's just call it index. We will be using the index and we're going to pass it down to the get tag props as the value to the index property within the object. So let's just log the return value of this thing. Let's log the entire return value. So now if we save it and if we take a look, we will see, we just refresh, we will see that as soon as we select something, this is actually the properties, the props which are forwarded towards individual tags that you see in a normal case. Now out of all the different props, there is one which we need, which is the on delete. We need to have the reference of this function so that we can call it from the remove button that we have over here. So that's the thing. Remove user, one second. Remove user. Okay, so kind of missed this one out. We don't have the function yet. Let's just remove it for now. So that's the entire objective, to get the respective on delete function and to call it when the respective remove button is called. So it means that we need to have a place where we can store the references of all these on delete functions. So for that, what we will be doing is, over here, let's create an object. Let's create an object and name it as delete function ref object, obj, in such a way. Now you can name it whatever you want. You can just go with object itself, or you can just name it in such a way. And now what we are gonna do is, we just need this part. And now what we will be doing is, while iterating over each tag, we will be updating the value. We will be adding the respective on delete function to this object. So for that, delete this thing which we have, the index of the tag, the value of it is going to be this function, but the on delete function, this is going to return back an object, and out of that we just care about the on delete. So we are in simple terms, in simple way, we are just holding or saving the reference of it, the reference of the on delete function for the respective tag with the tag's index. So now if I just log this object that we have, check this out. So if I log it out and if I just refresh, we will see that it is an object where the keys are the index value. This is going to be the index, this is going to be the first tag in a way, and the index of it is the key, and the value of it is the function which will remove this tag. So that's what we are doing. Now obviously we need the access to this thing outside, because like eventually we will be calling it from the remove button. So for that, instead of having a state, we will be having a reference, because if we have it as a state, then when we'll be updating it, it's going to re-render the component, which is something that we don't really want. We should always avoid re-rendering like redundant renders. So for that, instead we will be having a use ref, and let's name it as delete fn ref, and it's going to be use ref. The initial value of it is going to be null. So now what we will be doing is, over here, delete fn ref, and in order to update the value, we have to update the current value. Let's set it to be of this thing. So now we have it in this way. Let's actually log this thing, because the component would not re-render. Let's use the use effect, and let's log this value whenever the current changes in such a way. So now if we save it, let's take a look. It's not updating. Use ref is not defined. I thought we didn't import it. Let's see. So as you can see, at the moment it is null, but if we update the value, this thing, it is kind of displaying the value. So that's the thing. The current is an object with 3 keys, because we have 3 tags. Alright, so now that we have it in this way, we just have to call the appropriate, the right tag. So for that, let's create a function, handle remove or handle unselect option. Let's go with that, obt. So as a unique identifier for each option, as we do not have an ID, let's go with the name. And in this case, because the name is, the property of it is label, let's just go with label, so that it makes more sense. And now what we have to do, we need to find the index of the particular user. So for that, the index is going to be selected users, which is an array. We will be using the find index map, iterating over each user, getting the user dot label if it equals to label, that's the thing, and finally getting the it's actually, this will return back the index, so we don't have to do much. And now where we have the delete fn ref, the current value, the index, so this thing is going to be the function. That's the thing that you have to understand. This is going to be the function, and we are directly going to execute it in such a way. By the way, we don't have to do it now. And now if we save it, there is something, okay, wait a second, let's see. And oh, forgot that we also have to kind of call this function. Delete fn is being called, but this one we have to call, right? So where we are mapping over the entire thing, we have the user, right? So over here, the button, let's pass in a callback, calling the handle unselect option, and we will be passing user.label, as that's what we are taking under account. So now if we refresh and let's take it for a spin, if I click on remove, it gets removed. That is perfect. That is brilliant. So now we are actually able to kind of use the autocomplete component the way that it is, but at the same time we added, like, we built a UI on top of it. So that's the thing. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. It took way too much time than what I was expecting, but anyway, it's good to have everything clear rather than just kind of copying what is being presented on the screen or what is being done on the screen. Anyway, so hopefully you enjoyed it, and if you would like to have more of such content or anything, give your feedback. And again, I would really appreciate if you could kind of share the video among your peers, and at the same time make sure to subscribe the channel. Alright, so see you next time, and again, thank you for watching.